you an article, Erica.
So I get the honor the second Tuesday of every month to honor Student of the Month awards. So thank you all for coming. So the way we do this is we invite the students up, and I'll read the certificate, and we all can take photos, and then we'll do a group photo with Will, the editor of the Soper Sun, afterwards. So thanks all for coming. Do we have Chase Campbell here tonight? No Chase. Okay. How about Charlotte? Hi, Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte. Okay. Congratulations. Do you want to stand here so your parents can look at you? Do you mind telling everybody what school you go to, what grade you're in?
So I go to Ross Montessori School, and I'm in 3rd grade.
And what other kind of activities do you like to do other than be a great student?
I really like lacrosse.
Okay, all right. And that season's starting up here pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's what your teachers have to say about you. Charlotte is a sweet and deeply caring community member. She's positive and shows the adults and children at school how much she cares. Younger students look up to her. So do I. She is polite, honest, and has strong feelings for fairness. Congratulations, Charlotte. How about Christian?
I'm here.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Christian. I'm Dan. You mind turning a little bit so your parents can see you better?
Yes.
Okay. You can turn by other way, so you can look out there. You can stand right here. Yeah, there you go. So, Christian, you mind telling me what school you go to and what grade you're in?
I go in Ross Montessori School, and I live in 1st grade.
All right. And what sort of things do you like to do to have fun?
To get my works done in school.
That's good. All right. And do you like gorillas?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, me too. All right. Here's what your teachers have to say about you. You want to hold that for me? Yeah, you can just hold it just like that.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, can you just hold it like that for me? We'll both hold it. How's that? Christian, new to Ross Montessori, is kind and shows good manners with others. He helps out when needed and is seen frequently helping adults. That's great, Christian. They obviously think very highly of you. So you can keep that. And congratulations. How about Taylor? What a deal for you, Taylor. You're growing. All right. Do you mind telling everybody where you go to school and what grade you're in?
I go to Carbondale Community School, and I'm in 6th grade.
All right. And what sort of activities do you like to do when you're not in school?
I like to ski.
Ski? How about in summertime?
I like to travel.
Awesome. That makes two of us. Here's what your teachers have to say about you. Taylor's classmates consider her to be one of the nicest kids around. She has a great attitude. She is open to new ideas and different perspectives. Taylor respects the opinions of others at school. Fellow students appreciate her flexibility, friendliness, and willingness to work with anyone. Those are great traits. Keep it up. We need more like you. Congratulations. So again, there'll be a photo out there with Will, and Chase didn't show up while I wasn't looking, did you? Okay. All right, thanks everybody.
If I can have the kids out here with their certificate.
Walks so fast. How's Frankie doing?
He's in Coleridge.
I started about 30 seconds early tonight, so.
Thursday.
Makes me feel like a slacker.
Down the playoffs.
All right. Garrett's in for a fun and exciting meeting tonight, right? You staying for the whole thing? All right. All right. First order of business roll call. Kathy?
Ben Baumfock.
Here.
Lonnie Kitching.
Here.
Dan Richardson.
Here.
Heather Henry. Marty Silverstein.
Here.
Luis Ianis.
Here.
Erica Sparhawk.
Here.
I forgot. We'll call the meeting to order. All right. Item number 2 is the consent agenda. Item A is the accounts payable. Item B is the trustee minutes from January 22nd regular meeting. Item C is liquor license renewal for Pepinos. D is a liquor license renewal for Wine Time. E is a liquor license renewal for 7-Eleven. F is a tasting permit renewal for Wine Time. G is a Board of Adjustment, appointment of alternates. And H is the contract with DHM, Crystal River Restoration Project. Anybody have any questions?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Marty, seconded by Luis. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Great. Motion passes. Okay, item number 3, persons present not on the agenda. Anyone in the audience who'd like to address the board on something not on the agenda? Seeing none. Garrett, you're here for Ducks Unlimited, right? Yeah. Okay. Trustee comments, item number 4. Marty.
Well, since I wasn't present at the last meeting, I have to make up for it. This past Sunday, there was a 10th anniversary birthday brunch for the Soper Sun at the way home. That was very nice. They sold out of tickets, go there, 80 or 85, something like that? 75. Food was very good. There were sponsors that, business sponsors that helped keep the cost down. And I would say a good time was had by all. Also, on a history note, they've been working on binding by year the editions of the Soper Sun hard copies, so that there's a historical record for us to go back to.
All right.
So that's kind of nice. The other thing Saturday night was the Sopris, Mount Sopris Riders benefit over at the Orchard, and that was very nice. Nice local musicians, and just one of the things I like is that they don't ask us for money. They, groom the trails themselves, and the trails are open to everyone. So, that's kind of, they want to have this recreation, and they do the work themselves. They don't ask us for money. And the trails they maintain are open to people, whether they're members or non-members, whether they're snowmobile riders or hikers or, whatever. So I see that as a community good. And that's all I got.
All right. Thank you, Marty. Anybody else?
I do. Go ahead. I'll go after you. So as you know from when I emailed you guys, I went to Denver and testified on a vaping bill. Well, actually, I went to Denver twice for it. The first time was on the 30th, and it was supposed to be after another bill that was about comprehensive sex education. Turned out that hearing went till midnight. So we got down to Denver, and they canceled the hearing. So Greg Postman, County Commissioner from Picken County, and I had lunch in Denver that day and came back. So then we went on Friday and testified in front of the House Committee, and it passed out of the House that day. They passed it. And so this bill is not really about vaping in particularly, but it would allow counties, because they're not currently allowed to regulate it in any way, regulate tobacco products. So counties could do what we did and just raise the age limit. And then it also would remove the penalty that you get where you lose your share back if you decide to take on licensing. So I just spoke on behalf of us and explained, because there's lots of kind of the opponents are talking about how there's this patchwork of regulations, or this will create a patchwork of regulations. So I was sharing with the committee that there already is a patchwork, because we've passed it, Basalt's passed it, Aspen's passed it, but Picken, Eagle, and Garfield cannot. And so we have a existing patchwork. So if we could let counties, then counties who are interested could pass our regulation. And then it is in front of the Senate on Thursday, but I'm not going to make it back because I just was in Denver yesterday with CC4CA testifying on a bill about securitization, which allows utility companies to accelerate the closure of coal-fired power plants. It'll kind of reduce costs for ratepayers because they can pay down those assets sooner. And this would just provide that option for utilities. It's not a mandate. It's not saying the power plants have to close down, but it provides that option. And then it's unique. It would be the first securitization bill in the country that would include a portion of the savings that the utilities would achieve has to go towards impacted communities. And they have a mechanism where that would, I guess, avoid Tabor, because it would be its own franchise and, you know, its own authority, kind of, that could go back to those communities. They really needed a West Slope voice to testify, so they had asked if I would come over and represent Carbondale on that one.
Awesome.
So, if anybody else would want to go to the Senate committee hearing on Thursday, I could easily turn my testimony should share with you at least what I testified on if anybody wants to go. And I think Commissioner Greg Poshman, he's considering going as well. So there is a carpool opportunity and great bonding time when you take 2 trips to Denver with the county commissioner.
Thanks for doing that, Erica.
Yes. And so I did thank him also for county support of Red Hill, you know, trails around us, and all kinds of other topics. But
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's it.
Anybody else?
Me.
Lonnie?
I've got 5 little updates, so if you'll bear with me, I'll just read my notes to make it go quickly, and so I don't overlook anything. So in chronological order, Senior Matters, a big thank you to the town for the community funding that was granted, which will be used to elevate the organization's value to the senior community. One move was to reach out to a more seasoned Pickens County Senior Services team who are working towards hosting working title Home Fit Gathering at the 3rd Street Center on the 14th of March, which I believe will include a presence by Clear for their energy efficiency program for seniors. Side note is that apart from the mobility concerns we've recently heard, electric vehicle use is something that the senior community seems to be very much attuned to nationally as they seek ways of getting the more bang for their buck. So that might be a future gathering topic as well. And then on March 28th, Senior Matters Board Member April Spalding is facilitating a meeting at the Crystal Meadows Senior Living Facility around CBD beneficial use for senior-specific medical conditions. And then Marty's been spearheading the effort behind restoring functionality to the website.
I have.
Yes, you're the voice.
I said that should be a key project for us this year.
Yeah.
And I agree, it should be.
And then I've taken on producing content for any timely chamber newsletter announcements. Next is that I slid by last first Friday to the CoVenture soft opening. And I was really impressed by their programming and the thoughtful way they've remodeled the building's interior, which triggered the move to dissolve the 501c3 that was formerly known as the Citizens Group, Carbondale Economic Development Partnership. So my sense is that a business development presence can be provided by the CoVenture organization, not to be confused with economic development, which I have long maintained, that while sharing the goal of enhancing revenue, each approach requires a different set of rigors, as was discovered very quickly while spinning up the EDP. And I did kind of reconfirm that at the chamber meeting this afternoon at the luncheon during the tourism presentation, their approach to enhancing revenues, and that really fell in line with a different approach, let's just say. So myself, as one of the last 2 members and an officer by default, have positioned the remaining EDP assets to be transferred over to CoVenture, and that's namely the website. And so once the legal costs have been satisfied with the dissolution, then all other funds will be returned to the town's general fund. Next is the Crystal River Workshop, not to be confused with the Crystal River Management Plan that we'll be discussing a little bit later this evening. That's been ongoing for several years, and we'll be talking about. The workshop is the initiative I mentioned last fall that targets the upper reaches of the Crystal River, for which the 5 other RWAPA jurisdictions as stakeholders requested RWAPA's executive director to provide their representation. And this is at an additional incremental cost to be determined at the upcoming RWAPA board retreat. But since the diligence on the management plan is essentially identical to the Crystal River management plan that I've been exposed to, I volunteered to catch that ball for us. So a quick factoid, should it come up as an irregularity, is that I'll be representing us, and the other 5 jurisdictions will be represented by the RWAPA executive director. 2 meetings in, the value of our participation has been to provide input, but mostly to follow the project's progress, to see what kind of downstream impact and upstream improvement might yield, presumably to the good. Next is the Garfield County Water Forum. Again, a hearty thank you from the Colorado River District and CPW for our contribution to the drought-driven Root Eye water donation. Of the 900 acre feet, if memory serves, I believe the town contributed 250, which was hugely helpful in mitigating the deficit in the lower 15-mile Cameo Call reach. I gave a brief, broad brush overview of the VCAPS study that actually reinforced the climate change drivers that were the keynote of last Friday's meeting. And anyway, keeping it relevant to our environment, I cited 1 example each of a positive outcome and a potential consequence as we're looking at vulnerabilities. And I did make clear that since the report was hot off the press with recommendations yet to be reviewed by our board, its value as it stands would at least be as an operational guideline and decision support for staff. And there was also favorable acknowledgement of the Weaver Ditch Headgate project that we'll be discussing tonight as well. And then lastly, Monday was the Rocky Mountain Health Foundation, which is a newly formed foundation that resulted in the sale of the nonprofit Rocky Mountain Health Plan to the for-profit United Healthcare, resulting in a $40 million legally mandated fund that will live in perpetuity. And of that, $1 million has been dedicated to the Western Slope. Let's see. Their foundation is based in Grand Junction, and their board is formulating their strategic plan that we were assembled to provide input on. So awards are exclusively for programmatic health-related applications, but there is an opportunity for a municipality to support a nonprofit grant request, and collaborative requests get higher priority. My thoughts went to Youth Zone, who provides us a lot of support and received $5,000 on their own in the first year round last year. So if together we might be successful, as a portion then of our community fund might be redistributed elsewhere. But I've brought back some hard copy that I'll leave with staff so that you can take a look at that. And anyone else who's involved with a not-for-profit healthcare related entity would benefit from that as well. That's it.
That's it, she says. Busiest of the bunch. All right. Thanks, Lonnie. Luis, Ben? Luis?
Sure, just 2 quick things. CPAC had its juried of call for entry sculptures last week, which I was part of. So that will open June 6th, and you'll see new sculptures start to go up in May. So some great new work that's been chosen by that commission. And tomorrow's Parks and Rec Commission meeting, which will be here in Town Hall, is an open house that involves a north face master plan survey, which includes the futsal and pickleball design ideas. So tomorrow at 7:15 here. So that's it.
Great. Thanks, Luis.
I can be really brief.
Okay.
I attended Bike Ped Trails, held one of their meetings that's not one of their regular quarterly ones because Kevin asked for some input on the Meadowwood Drive project, which was productive, and then we'll see them next week at the mobility workshop. And I'd just say also, as Lonnie did, I stopped into the co-venture opening on First Friday and was really impressed and really glad that we were able to work with them on, supporting them. And it just sounds like a lot of good things are going to happen there.
All right. Thank you. I have a few. As I warned everybody at the last meeting, I spoke at the Garfield County Republicans about VRBO and what the city of Glenwood is doing, and I feel like right now we're still on the right course, that we're seeing how things evolve, but I feel like we have a good pulse on that right now, so that was reaffirming. Attended the FMLD luncheon with Jay and Eric, which was always great to receive some grant funding, and still brainstorming how we can have a collaborative project proposal with some other entity. They're really looking for that. And we didn't really brainstorm that, but
we tried last year with the school district, and we were not the chosen partnership with the school district because of some of the issues with the new school accessibility. But we are going to re-propose to them this year to try to get repeaters in all the larger school buildings where there's dead zones for safety.
Okay.
We have a series of schools in the area that if we had a major issue, we wouldn't have complete communication throughout. So that's something that Gene, the police chiefs, are going to reapproach the school district and say, can we make this work? I don't know if it'll be as high up, but I think we could get multiple communities, police departments, and the school district, and maybe both school districts at the table on it.
great. I didn't know that.
Yeah, sorry.
Good. I also attended Jim Calloway's memorial service, and it was, while those are never fun, it was really uplifting. The community really came out in force, and I learned even more about Jim, so it was great. And we had a party at the 3rd Street Center afterwards, and most people knew how much he did around Carbondale, but it was enlightening to see what he's done elsewhere nationwide, so a big loss for the community for sure. I attended the Garfield County meeting on Monday, as you may have read. Just offered thanks to the Garfield County Commissioners for their continued support of protection of the Thompson Divide. There's a little bit of a diversion of where to go from here, but they've been pretty consistent with their opinion, and they've gone out of their way to express their particular support for Thompson Divide. So I communicated that with them on our board's behalf. Happy birthday to Soper's son. Sorry I missed that, but was under the weather on Sunday. Lastly, I did talk to Michael Lowe at CoVenture today, and it appears that their board meetings are going to be Monday afternoons, or a Monday afternoon. They're not sure which Monday of the month, around 4 o'clock. So I said I'd figure out who could be on that board. I believe I've heard interest from Marty, Ben, and Lonnie, maybe even Luis. I pulled out this list, and it seems like, Ben, your load is the lightest of anybody here, but I just thought I'd see if anybody feels strongly either way about being on that board.
I'd like to be on their board, and I could do that time.
Yeah, Monday, 4 o'clock is kind of hard for me.
Okay.
I will be going back to work in a month, so.
Okay.
Are you not working?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
Only to become a short timer.
That's okay, but still, it's going to be at least 6 months. So,
Okay. Anybody opposed to Ben sitting on that board?
No, that'd be great.
Is that okay with you, Luis?
Yeah, I can't. 4 p.m. doesn't work.
Yeah, I do feel like I have a light load right now, so I'm willing to. I feel like I need more updates to give.
Go to Denver on Thursday. You'd be good.
Kathy, do you mind updating this and sending it out to the board? All right. Thank you. Anything else?
I forgot one thing.
Okay.
When I was in Denver on February 1st, I did go to the Michael Bennett's kind of announcement of the CORE Act.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg and I made sure that they knew, like they were announced. They were like, we want to make sure that town of Carbondale is here. We want everybody to know, and Pickens County is represented here. So I didn't get up and speak or anything, but he knew we were there.
All right. We already have been asked to endorse certain letters that I expect to share when they come. Actually, we received one, but it was too late to bring it tonight. So just be thinking about that. Maybe read the legislation. Okay. we were ahead of schedule when we did persons present not on the agenda. Anybody here on an item not on the agenda? Okay, just checking. Mark, anything from you?
I'll save it for executive session.
Okay, thank you. Item number 6, special event liquor license for Ducks Unlimited. Mr. Charman. Thanks for coming in person.
Yeah, you bet.
So you've been here before. You kind of know the drill.
Yeah, a little bit. Just kind of give a little background, right?
Yep,
what
and
we're
you're on air, so if you want to advertise anything, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, we're having our, first off, I'm Garrett Jammeron. We're having our annual Ducks Unlimited banquet on March 2nd over at the Orchard. Doors open at 5 o'clock. I would love to tell you where to buy tickets and how much, but we are sold out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've got 340
Nice
people
job.
roughly at this point already signed up, and that is max capacity. So, yeah, we're really looking forward to it. Hickory House is kind of doing the catering.
Awesome.
They've done that for several years now. Great event, really fun party, and we're raising money for Ducks Unlimited to essentially conserve wetlands. Not necessarily locally here. It's kind of tough on the western slope given private property, public property, and the cost of things, but a lot of the work's done up north in the, in Canada especially, but also Montana and Wyoming, sort of the headwaters for our flyways here. So we obviously love helping to raise money for them and are looking for a banner year, another one.
Great. Any questions of Garrett?
No.
Okay.
I would move to approve the liquor license for Ducks Unlimited.
Second.
Motion by Erica, seconded by Lonnie. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. All right. Good luck with the event.
Thanks
for
guys.
coming in, Garrett.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to item number 7, special event liquor license for the Carbondale Arts Fashion Show.
My timing was incredible.
It really is. Nicely done, Amy.
I've gotten used to this.
As usual.
Hi.
The floor is yours, Amy. Tell us what you're doing.
All right, Green is the Black. It's our 11th year. It's almost sold out. So we'll start selling the preview tickets. It happens March 14th through 16th, but we only are looking for a liquor license on the 15th and 16th. We like to do a show that doesn't have liquor, so it's just easier on everyone. And it's going to be business as usual. We have a martini bar, and we use all local liquors, Roaring Fork Beer and Marble Distillery. The wine, we haven't found a local winery yet, but yeah, we expect it to be amazing. Actually, it really is. And the theme is Oz.
That's a cool theme.
Yeah.
All right.
Still opportunities to volunteer? Or is that
Not
all
many.
filled up too?
You know, I don't know. I haven't checked the volunteer, but I know it's pretty full. But it's worth. You can go to carbondalearts.com and you can link to volunteers or to tickets. And we will open the tickets for the preview on the 18th.
Carbondale Arts is the only organization I know that has a waiting list for volunteers.
Well, that's a good thing because we need so many of them. So we really are happy when people volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Amy?
No. I would move to approve the liquor license for Carbondale Arts, Green is the New Black, for March 15th and 16th.
Motion by Erica, seconded by Lonnie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say no. All right. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. This is great.
Yeah.
We've got our new sponsors here, too. Look at that.
Oh, yeah?
Thanks, Amy.
you guys.
Great. All right. Moving on to the main event. Item number 8, ordinance number 3, series of 2019, and development improvement agreement, Main Street Marketplace. The applicant is Crystal River Marketplace, LLC. Location is Lot 1, Carbondale Marketplace subdivision. Bob, you flying solo tonight?
Kristen will be here in a minute.
Okay. Sorry, we're a little ahead of schedule.
Neither one of us was going to say anything other than we agree, so I guess I can say we agree.
Janet, you want to introduce it?
On November 27th, the board approved the Main Street Marketplace application and directed staff to prepare approval documents. So what you have before you tonight is the ordinance of approval and the development improvement agreement. And as a reminder, the proposal for Main Street Marketplace is a mixed-use development with about 10,000 square feet of commercial and 115 residential dwelling units. It's on the 5-acre parcel that's just west or behind 7-Eleven on the north side of West Main Street. And all of the residential units in that development would be rentals. And so 20% of those units would be deed restricted as affordable housing units. And one of the new things that you probably saw in the application is a phasing plan, and they might want to go over that after a bit. Are there any high points, Jay, that you want to add for the development?
There's something kind of unique in this dealing with the restoration language. It's a new one for us due to kind of the phasing and the sequencing of this project. We negotiated with the development team some security which will go in place when the first building permit's issued for restoration of the site if it ends up getting partially developed. Internally, we kind of refer to this as the base village clause, but it's more so that we could have some leverage if we end up with like the large piles we have out there right now in some other locations, that we'd have the ability, if the project stalled, to level them out and seed the areas. There's some provisions in the SIA which allows us to address public safety issues like rebar being exposed and screening. It's not really specific exactly how it would be used because it's kind of an open-ended one to be able kind of just to address overall issues there. But that's the first time we've included a restoration provision and funding for it in agreement. And I think it was a logical way to do it under this project because of how large a project is and how the time frame for it to evolve over time could be, but for full build out. So I don't know if Bob wants to expand on that because we spent quite a bit of time, or
no, it
staff did.
The whole process has been really good, give and take, and working with staff and the project's attorney and Mark. Everybody just sort of worked through issues and, as Jay said, did a few things that were a little bit different, but I think it gives everybody the level of security that they need to feel like it's going to evolve in a way that makes sense.
Great.
Yeah.
So in closing, I recommend approval of Ordinance number 3, series of 2019, and the Main Street Development Improvement Agreement. Okay. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Mark.
Thank you. Any questions of Janet or Mark at this time?
I'm comfortable with that approach. It's been very common in the environment that I came from, as termed the performance damage deposit. It's the same sort of a thing, so I think it's a measure of goodwill. So I would move to approve Ordinance 3 Series.
Can you hold on that just
Sure.
for a second? Great, thank you. Normally I'm chomping at the bit for those motions. Wait, any other questions for staff? I just wanted to clarify. So really when we approved the project, really the only thing that I think a lot of us were wondering how it would happen is the phasing plan. And so this is the document that says how does the project get developed. And so what I understand is really the one requirement is that the utilities and just the utilities, the infrastructure, I should say, it's completed by November 1st, 2020. And then the project can really develop as the developer and the market allows. So we talked about different phasing, but really that's the only deadline that the developer's held to. And then, as Jay alluded to, there's the I just lost the word. There's the grading and the revegetation. And that's one thing that, why I by no means want an onerous set of requirements. I just, that, you know, to some, grading could mean I moved a yard of dirt and I planted a weed. So I just thought that there needed to be some kind of language so that we're on the same page, or some sort of thing so that we agree what grading and revegetation means, rather than just stating that. So Mark, I thought I'd ask you, do you have thoughts on that? Do you feel it's vague? Is it?
You mean the just to make sure I understand your question, do I think that it's adequately specific with regard to what restoration means in terms of the security?
Yes.
If you look at paragraph 4H of the Development Improvements Agreement.
Do you have a page in our packet?
My packet, unfortunately,
94.
isn't indexed.
Page 94.
Okay.
Let me see. Okay, page 94. So, you know, I worked with Kevin Shorsman on this language, and it is a little bit unique. We haven't done it exactly this way before, but this provides that if progress ceases out there for any extended time period, then the town's rights to potentially use this restoration money would include the ability to deal, it starts about in the fourth sentence there, we can remove construction materials, regrade, reseed, do dust control and weed management. The developer is also obliged to deal with any public nuisance issues, unsightliness, or public safety issues. And we put an example in there, you know, for instance, by removing any exposed rebar or dangerous items from the site, or placing fencing and signage to preclude public access to or the view of any partially constructed improvements. So that was sort of a Carbondale version of the base village clause, so to speak, working with Kevin to say, you know, what do we really need? We need to keep kids from climbing on piles of dirt and keep them away from exposed rebar and deal with weeds and dust. Anyway, so that, I don't know if that's responsive to your question, Dan, but that's what's in there.
Not really. What I was looking for is, so if the project were to go belly up, we would have the money to do it however we want. What I'm looking for is, like, for me, the concerns would be noxious weed proliferation, and so we didn't have a big pile of dirt that, you know, just grew weeds, that it just looked somewhat sightly, you know, doesn't have to look like a manicured lawn. So all I'm looking for is some kind of agreement so we just know what does it mean to regrade and revegetate while you're in between projects. So maybe I'll ask you guys, what is that asking too much to better define that, or we're charting new ground here? So
Well, I thought literally the document that we agreed upon is pretty clear in my mind what that means.
Yeah?
Yeah. So, I mean, we had two attorneys and and your town engineer and our engineer, and everybody tried to come up with some language that made sense.
Okay.
So I think we'd have the same concern, right?
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, this project is not going to happen overnight. We want to make sure that it's, through its various phases, it's left in a state of marketability, it's safe for the community. So I think, Dan, we have the same concerns you do.
Dan, I may have misspoke to a degree. That what I just said, those obligations are the obligations of the developer regardless of how much they cost. So if it's $1 million to regrade, then that's what they have to do. There's only $100,000 security. You know,
Right.
so the number is capped as far as what the town might demand, but those obligations are not limited. And that 4H outlines, you know, what they are in terms of, you know, what I walk through. So if the board has additional direction on defining regrading or reseeding, or you know, certainly you could provide that.
And I think need to remember that the existing town nuisance clauses in our code still apply. So the standards for weeds and upkeep are the same to this lot as any other project if it goes, or any other lot in town if it goes dormant. Now, we don't have real active stuff, but we do have, there are some standards in there, including for dust.
So would we be signing off on this like any other infrastructure improvement, that yes, you've regraded and reseeded?
I don't think we'd be doing specific site inspections on it unless we're dealing with the need to actually pull it. I don't think we have an inspection out which says, here's how it's been left, but I will be on site, quite a bit throughout the construction on it. I think this is just an additional tool for us if there is an issue.
Can we just simply add that staff signs off that regrading and revegetation has occurred per the agreement?
I would.
Or is that necessary? I don't want to make this, I just don't want it to be left undone.
I think this is going to be a practice of the town in general, then spending the time to research some ways that people have addressed this and coming up with one that will work on every project. This was really, it isn't in the town code, it isn't a requirement. We just all came together and said, here's a concern, let's figure out how to address that concern. And so if this is going to be a new town policy to require this, then there might be a separate effort to create something that has the level of definition that you might be requiring.
No, I get it, and I appreciate the willingness to put it in there because it's not in our code. But we've just had a couple of projects that have gone undone, and stuff happens. So I'm not going to argue with Jay and Mark if you guys feel like we're covered. I just wanted to make sure that you feel confident.
There's certainly nothing in here, Dan, that precludes the town from inspecting and, reporting back to the board that things are a mess and we recommend drawing on the security. There's a required notice provision to give them a chance to cure if we identify that. But the omission of language that requires the town to do a 12-month inspection does not preclude us from doing one. We just simply need a calendar and get it done.
Okay. I mean, I know if it was, so, okay. If nobody else has a concern, then I'm not going to beat this dead horse, so. Okay. Any other? Yep. Ben.
Just a clarification, Janet. On the maps that show the public improvements and color-coded and all that, I was just curious why, there's the purple, the sidewalks and trails, and it shows the one up the middle, it shows the one along West Main, and it shows the one on the northeast corner, but it doesn't show the one along Hendrick Drive on the east side of the property being a public improvement required in the development improvements agreement. Could you just?
I think the difference is going to be whether they're public or private. So the things that are on the actual property of the project will be owned by the project.
Right.
The things that are in the town right away are public improvements. So the project would pay for those, but they would belong to the town of Carbondale.
Right. That's why I was wondering, because the property line, as it's shown on here, the sidewalk on Hendrick is in the public right-of-way, according to the map that we have.
Sidewalk on Hendricks should be a part of the subdivision improvement agreement for City Market.
Okay.
So
that
explains
answers
it.
it. That's right.
And
that answers the question.
Hendricks and Shorty Paps.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Other questions, comments? Kristen, anything you'd want to add?
No, we'd hopefully look forward to approval so we can advance parcel 1.
All right. Now, Lonnie.
Get back to my spot here. Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Move to approve ordinance number 3, series of 2019, and the Main Street Marketplace Development Improvement Agreement as prepared by Janet Buck, the planning director.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Lonnie, seconded by Marty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say no. All right. Onward and upward.
Thank you.
And we'd welcome any kind of project update.
Trustees wanted an update.
That'd be great.
On the project.
Yep.
So I'll give you a quick update on the public work that's going on, as well as some of the off-site work that's happening, that we're getting geared up. We effectively shut down for the winter months here, so we didn't incur a lot of winter conditions. As many of you may know, Gould is primarily our utility contractor. City Market, which is good. They're spending money. So a lot of the work that you see out there is some of their obligations. So we have a business deal with City Market where they effectively reimburse us for the work that's happening. City Market is in the process. They'll be finished probably within the next 30 days of, I'm going to say, upgrading the package of their store. So internally, they have redesigned all their refrigeration systems. They've redesigned their interior finish package to what they have explained to me is their premium package for their store. So that's good news for the town and good news for the community. They are going to effectively break ground on their store no later than June 3rd. Okay? So that is about a month and a half later than we've previously represented to the board. And we still look at having the store open late third, early fourth quarter of 2020.
Okay.
Okay. And then also, we've invited First Bank, both the regional president and president of First Bank, that like to introduce. Why don't you guys stand up, introduce yourself? But we'd like to invite you to a groundbreaking ceremony that's been scheduled. So feel free to chat about First Bank.
Thanks.
Yeah,
And if you would just speak at a podium so we get it recorded.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. We will not take too much time, but my name's Dave Portman. I'm the market president here for First Bank in the Roaring Fork Valley, and this is Brendan Mathias. He's our executive vice president. He'll be so I oversee the valley from Glenwood to Aspen, and Brendan will oversee our Carbondale market as we get opened here later this year. So we're excited to announce after I think it's 4 years of work in progress. We closed on our dirt here in December, which you probably know, which is a nice New Year's gift for us, and we're excited to join the community. And I think February 25th, our construction team is scheduled to mobilize on the project, and we look forward to opening sometime around the beginning of October. So we have a groundbreaking ceremony with a few exciting announcements and partnerships in the community, and a little celebration to kind of get off on an exciting start here as we join you all in Carbondale. So we have some formal invitations we'll hand out in paper form today, and then we'll follow up with an email to all of you. But we'd love for you guys to join us on the 26th at our new site.
Great. Time on the 26th?
2 to 3 p.m. Tuesday the 26th.
Yeah.
All right. People watching on TV.
Asses watching.
Well, thank you for investing in Carbondale.
Yeah.
Your project.
Yeah, I could share with you they've been, First Bank has been very good partners. This has been a long road, as many of you know. And we've been working together for 4 years on this project, and we're finally at the point where we can put a shovel in the ground for the new First Bank. So I'd like to thank you for that.
All right. Thanks for the efforts.
A couple other things just to tie into those updates. We expect to see the final set of plans with the new interior. I guess there's one interior which has been built this way within the Kroger family, probably by early March to have it ready for a building permit to be issued for the late May, early June start. In March, you're going to see a fair amount of work start occurring along West Main for the ditch work, for the Rockford ditch. We're going to see weeks, whether it's 2, 3, or 4, I'm not positive yet, on single lane traffic on West Main. We'll be also doing some improvements to some town drainage in that area. So that's quite a bit of work to get that ditch crossing in place, consolidate, get some other utilities across the road. We'll be sleeving that for future utilities. But because of the location, it won't allow you to make a left if you're coming out of Hendricks onto West Main. You're going to have to loop back and go through the roundabout during that period. So there will be some. We had some similar disruptions farther down West Main when we were doing the water line connection, but this one will be a little more front and center as you're dealing with access to the current city market and Ace and Hendricks. So just want to get that out there. There will be a lot of work hitting on the infrastructure side. Right now it's been primarily on-site other than the utility crossings. This is when we're going to really start to see things hitting along our street. So wanted to get that out there.
And you guys know about the Black Hills Wolf Creek project, so they'll be bringing heavy traffic through there. I don't know when, but
we've been coordinating with them in terms of giving us notice on that so that they can get through.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Bob.
Item number 9 is just scheduling our second March meeting, seeing whether or not we really have a quorum. Who's going to be here for that meeting? March 26th, I think.
I'll be here.
So Lonnie will be here, Marty will be here.
I'll be here.
Luis will be here. Does anybody know if Heather?
Probably not. I don't think she'll be here. Well, under the
Yeah,
circumstances. I don't
even
know.
before this, I thought she had spring break, they're doing something.
I remember her saying something about that.
So Jay, do you have an alternative idea?
Text her,
Well,
ask her.
I won't be here either, so you're welcome to meet. But what we've done in past years, when we've had a spring break conflict and weren't going to have a quorum, is we've switched that March work session to a special meeting and let everyone know ahead of time so that we kind of make that a special meeting where you can make decisions, but we also put some work session agenda items on there too and kind of consolidate that do 2 meetings in March instead of 3. So that would be our recommendation.
Okay. She was. Janet, thank you. That was
Nice.
easy.
Exciting stuff.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's gonna go.
Anybody have any issues with that? So if we combine our work session with a regular meeting the 3rd week in March?
That sounds fine to me. I mean, we could also meet on the 5th potentially if we have so many agenda items that are urgent that we need to have 3 full meetings. But I'm fine with just consolidating, and I think we're pretty efficient.
So we would do the 12th and the 19th and not have a meeting on the 26th.
Correct.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Do you have any sense that the agendas would be so full that we shouldn't do that?
I think we should be okay with what we have coming through the pipeline right now.
Okay. Everybody down with that?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
We probably should have a motion on that just because we're setting it as a special meeting.
Okay.
So would the motion be to move the meeting to that or just make the
Make
March
the 19th a special meeting.
Okay.
And to cancel the meeting on
Okay.
Okay.
Let me take a shot
Go
at
for
this.
it, Marty.
That our meeting of March 19th will be a special meeting as well as a work session, and our meeting of March 26th will be canceled.
That's it, I guess.
Motion by Marty, second by Lonnie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. I changed it up that time.
Nobody ever votes no, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay. Let's move on into VCAPS. Item number 10.
VCAPS.
Are you taking that, Jay?
Sure.
That's
we
too bad Heather's not here.
talked a little while back about the VCAP process and copied you on the report. The board asked for kind of a summary of what we had built into and approved in the 2019 budget, which were related to the action items on this. So that's essentially what this agenda item does. I think it should also spark some additional discussion on where we want to go on this process and what kind of action items. Heather's been a little bit of the champion on this, so having her not here tonight might be an issue. But just real quick, we did the VCAP process in September 2018. Some of the board was involved, staff, community members. It was a full day and a half kind of planning scenario. I think one of the most valuable items which kind of launched that process was the climate assessment that Jeff Lucas did. We included that in the packet. We're trying to get that out as much as possible, saying here's real data and real science of what's happening directly here in our valley. And when you look at some of those temperature projections, it's pretty, both in the modest or low carbon and the high carbon scenarios, they're both pretty significant in terms of impacts on our community and as we deal with infrastructure planning and wildfire mitigation and all those kind of action items. It's coming quicker than I think a lot of us thought, me included on that. And I think it's evident in some of our current infrastructure planning for the town. So we were one of the first communities to participate in this process. It was kind of a model guinea pig type thing to say, hey, do we want to try this in other communities? We were pretty pleased with the takeaway. A lot of the action items, when you look in the overall report, are pretty broad, because it was all kinds of different community members saying, let's take on this issue, let's take on that issue, some beyond the town's means, and broader community goals. So as you look at, there's two different scenarios in there in terms of which way to go on implementation on that. So as you look at the overall report, keep that in mind. But what we did was we took one of the scenarios, a lot of them overlapped, the two scenarios overlapped on action items, and kind of took a look at our budget and did a summary of what's currently budgeted in 2019. In terms of the reduced runoff, there was items about how to communicate issues and emergencies to the public, and we referenced the communications plan in that. We have $55,000 budgeted for stormwater drainage improvements. We had put $10,000 in for the lighting retrofit in Town Hall. That's about 2/3 done right now, as you can tell in this room, on the switch over, and there's still some improvements where we can change the temperature of some of this lighting. We do have $416,000 for the hydroelectric plant at Nettle Creek. We'll look at whether to leverage some financing on that. Really, the thing which is holding us back on that right now is the permitting from the U.S. Forest Service. It was at the bottom of the pile before the shutdown, so now it's really been at the bottom of the pile to try to get that approval in place, but we're doing our part. Various fleet upgrades. We continue to look at upgrading our fleet. For example, the one new police vehicle that we've ordered for 2019 is the first Ford Interceptor hybrid model. So first kind of specialized hybrid for mainline. There's been some really exotic ones for police, but this is kind of the mainstream one, which is designed for all the police electronics and stuff. So we'll be hopefully putting that into service mid to late year. We do the funding for core under utilities of $15,000. We have the $25,000 support for the GCE initiatives. We have the $30,000 for the Carbondale specific energy programs. And then we're also looking at our code improvements. We have some grant monies going directly to consultants on that, and we have some money set aside in our budget to try to get that done. We said building and energy, but that's also the green code improvements. Some of the other items were the stress on ecosystem. So we do have a project right now that our arborist has been and vegetation manager has been working with Roaring Fork leadership, and that's the Friends of Carbondale Gardens, to try to get a structure in place for some volunteer groups to help on our landscapes in town, and part of that will be dealing with drought issues on those landscape systems. We've got the bag fee fund, which is still in place. At some point will go away when we get rid of all plastic bags within the system and paper ones. The RFP for the single hauler, a lot of that was funded through the bag fund last year and then staff time. I believe those get open the 22nd of February. So we have been putting out a significant, or Kevin has been working on potential vendor questions, and that process is going well to date. We'll see how the responses come back. And then we have a series of ongoing energy upgrades to town facilities just across the board. There's a whole section on fire and wildfire, and on that it's really a partnership with the Carbondale Rural Fire Protection District, and we'll continue to be working with them on some of the interface issues in town. Really where we really concentrated our funding is on utility side. So the reduced water supply, we've included $50,000 for developing the Roaring Fork well field number 4. That's more the planning side. That doesn't really develop a well. That starts the legal side. We've been talking with some of the landowners in there and trying to come up with a location for that next well, which would be the path of least resistance for both support infrastructure and getting it drilled. We have, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have them permitted, or the water rights for the wells, but we don't.
Water rights, no permits.
We have water rights, no permits, and we don't have easements in place for them. So part of the puzzle's there, but we have a ways to go. We included $500,000 for increasing the capacity at the Roaring Fork Water Treatment Plant. We're fairly far along in the design of that, and between utilities and Kevin working with Roaring Fork Engineering, I think we're going to mirror or match up a different technology in that plant to its current technology, and be able to increase that at 500,000 gallons to that plant for well below that budget number. That budget number was based on using the same technology of the membrane system, and the hurricane filters that we're using at the Crystal plant are working really well. So we're trying to design it to actually have two technologies in the one plant, though it's similar to what we have in one of our other plants. But we think that's going to be a dramatically different price point. $150,000 for the adding the pumps on the Nettle Creek line, so we don't get in the situation from last year. We've got $75,000 for the Weaver Ditch and Crystal River improvements. There's actually a little bit more of that as you look at grants coming in from last year, this year, and then into the next year. And the $35,000 for the Crystal River design planning. Those are ones which that contract that we just did, it was actually with River Restoration and DHM. That was on consent agenda, the consent agenda tonight. We've got a meeting actually tomorrow to kind of look at the staff level to work with them on some of the timing of that work. The $102 million for the new clarifier, that does deal, it's not only because of climate issues, but it does deal with some of the more concentrated wastewater solids as you're using less water. That's one of the things which got talked about. You can't really have a planning meeting without Mark O'Mara without getting into biosolids, and that was part of the discussion with our group, but an important one. Tourism, we talked about how drought can impact our tourism economy and what our current funding is right now towards that. The reduced irrigation for town facilities. Our budget has $66,000 for redoing a very leaky irrigation system. And probably we'll have some additional moisture sensors on it. And then we're kind of having I think it'll be long-term, an ongoing dialogue of what our parks should really look like, and open spaces. Do we keep some very green? Do we keep some more on a fringe type native grasses? We're going to see it as part of the discussion on the planning at the Parks and Rec Commission tomorrow night for the pickleball in North Face and the futsal, where we'd be replacing quite a bit of turf with astroturf probably, or artificial turf. We don't use the term astro anymore, artificial turf, for a portion of that field for the futsal courts over time. So that's going to be an ongoing thing. There was a whole section on reduced agricultural irrigation. That's not really an action item for the town. That's more of a community discussion. And then also a portion on the call on Nettle Creek and how that's going to influence us long term. And I think some of the Nettle Creek, I mean, some of the improvements in the Roaring Fork and being able to backflow that pipeline will deal with some of those issues. Mark and I were talking today, gosh, probably 6 years ago when the board invested in the extra 250 acre feet in Rudai. We sat there and said, both the water engineers and staff said, it'd be nice to have, but it's kind of, we don't need it in terms of our water planning. Now that's looking like a really good decision from the board. We actually purchased that water because we didn't want it to go to energy companies, to be honest. But it's a great element to our portfolio, and it's something which we'll probably end up fully using, where right now we've been donating it to other downstream needs. So that's turned out to be a really good investment. So that's kind of a quick thing of what we've put in there. I mean, that what we've put in our budget. A lot of other items are just everyday operational side. You know, I think kind of the culture of our organization and the community overlaps of when we look at things, how does this impact on the energy use, the water use, you know, as we're designing and dealing with everyday issues on our town facilities. Some of the other reports out there, other than VCAP, is our climate action plan with some pretty lofty goals on when to go carbon neutral, I think is the term we used in there. I think you're going to see the E-Board come forward and try to get you to accelerate that by a decade. I mean, that's an ongoing discussion at the E-Board level. Our water and wastewater master plan, Some of the funding and financial models that we put in there are coming true, and I think the increases that we've put in place staggered over time and how we're trying to position our fund balances and resources to deal with our infrastructure is tying well to these issues. Our water efficiency plan and then that ongoing Crystal River management plan. I think last summer was a real wake-up call to folks of what a river looks like with no water in it or limited water, but when there's way more use than supply. So it, I think, gave some ideas of what could be done better there too. So that's just real quick overview, and I'll just turn over the board for any discussion, comments, where we want to go on this.
Thoughts, questions? I kind of had two thoughts of, so what do you do with this as a tool, as a lens? And I'm not suggesting we do this, but there are two ways I think we can incorporate this into our decision-making process. One would be, and both would require staff time and thought. One, whenever we adopt or consider a budget, we ask that the lens of climate mitigation be used, and so we know just exactly what staff did here, just how we know how the money's being spent as it relates to climate mitigation. And if we really wanted to get in the weeds, we could say we could do that with most decisions we make on the board. Whether it be a project or funding something, we can say, well, how does that relate to climate mitigation, and does it help or hurt? So those were two thoughts I had, but don't all speak at once.
It's hard to know where to start, I think. This is a huge report, and I like the way that we've taken the kind of the existing things that we're doing and that we've talked about and put them into this. And my questions are around what else should we do? And I don't really know when and how is the best way to think about some of that stuff. It seems like the main thing that comes through this report to me is water. But it's also interesting that the report at the beginning of it with the slideshow said that there's no clear trend on precipitation amounts in recent climate fluctuations. Could be more some years, could be less some years. But the other thing I think when I look at the possibility for us to be, that the drought is sort of the new normal kind of thing, we're focused a lot on the supply side, and I think we should have some discussions about reducing demand as well. And so some of the things that you just talked about, what the town can do, but I think about the fact that when a lot of people put their pump into the ditch, they feel like, hey, free water and it's a free-for-all, and there's this impression of we use our water rights or we lose our water rights, so let's use them, and our lawns are ridiculously green and all that. And so I think I'm interested in if we want to approach that at some point, and even if we spend some of our enterprise funds from our water funds on reducing demand rather than just increasing supply, because I think we're doing a lot of really good, really proactive stuff on increasing supply with the wells and the skid and the rights and all that, but there's still going to be a limit. And then I also think about, do we want to look at our development code at some point and make it more aggressive in terms of requiring really low water use kinds of things. It was interesting to hear that the project that we just approved had redone its landscaping. They didn't talk about that tonight, but at their last meeting, I think, talked about that because of the drought, they really rethought all their landscaping and made it much less water intensive. And my first thought was, why didn't we make them do that in the first place? So it sounds like the code still has some room we just saw proof of concept, right? Mm-hmm. That there's still room to be more aggressive with that. So those are just sort of the things that I'm thinking about.
I would second that, Ben. I would think using Las Vegas and Clark County as an example, and their water situation is a lot more severe than ours, but they have a big push on xeriscaping. Okay, so decreasing the demand for water you don't have to have, every home doesn't have to have, you know, green grass to be on their quarter acre or whatever to make it attractive, landscaping. And I really wish Heather was here because this is right up her alley. But, you know, there are alternatives, and maybe to educate people and find a way to make it more desirable. I mean, when I say they're strict, they have teams that go around and you get fined if you're watering on the wrong day. And I forget if it's, first fine's like $100, but the second fine is like $500. And there's no, oh, I didn't know it was an odd day and I have an odd house. They just give you the ticket and then you can go argue in court. We're not at that point, but I think your point of education and alternatives and getting people to think of, you know, yeah, just because I can draw from the ditch, that doesn't mean I have to water for 3 hours every day during the summer. The same way we're working on the, you know, gradually, we've got people used to the bags. The residents are used to bringing your own bags. I know we all probably have bags in our cars. And even when we don't, if I forget to bring it in the store, I put it in the car and I take it out to the car and I put it in a bag in my car. So, you know, people can be taught new habits. It just takes effort and time.
I agree with all of that, and I think, you know, beyond the consumptive use, maybe we need to start looking at our rate of build-out, actually, to be honest. I mean, I worry about some of the feedback that was given at the Water Forum relative to where we are with the woeful reserves in the Lake Powell and Lake Mead reservoirs. I mean, they're still at 44% on average. And we're still, as the Colorado River Basin, obligated to conform with the 1922 Compact. So that's a huge driver that's going to impact our whole region's utilization, maybe from a higher level than we can control here at the municipal level. So I would kind of keep that in the back of our mind. I mean, you know, it's a little bit misleading to look at this new SNOTEL map where everything is over 100% of precipitation based on the snowpack, but still, you know, we're at a huge deficit, and as you've read in the papers, Arizona still hasn't come forward with their plan, so it's concerning on a regional level, and all of our basin water managers are hard at work to protect the western slope interests. But it's been, let's just say, a colorful discussion.
Hey, just quick, Mark, could you hit on how much pre-1922 water we have? And I mean, we all kind of focus on the compact column, not to get too off topic, but yeah. I think it's important for the board to have a feeling on if they say there won't be one, but if there was, where Carbondale's positioned.
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, Jay. I mean, generally speaking, the main ditches on the Crystal were established prior to 1922, and so they would be considered to be senior to a compact call. There are other things we have, like the Roaring Fork wells and Nettle Creek, that are junior to a potential compact call, and so we have a mix, and that's why we like to have a diversity of sources and root eye and all those sorts of things. But so I think we're in a decent situation compared to a lot of other towns, but it's not that 100% of our water supplies are compact protected.
So we'd have good water, we would just have to drink our ditch water.
Well, the way our water rights work is you can dry up, you know, former irrigated lands in exchange for taking that water through the Roaring Fork wells. So right. You don't have to drink the ditches, okay. But the water rights still provide you with water.
Okay.
Indirectly.
I think the project we just heard is all theoretically Rockford water, which is the oldest water in the system. So in some cases, the new development would be bringing the oldest water to the table as we're kind of looking at that build-out issue.
Mm-hmm.
The Rockford, by way of example, is an excellent water right on one of the most senior on the river, and that's what we're getting with the marketplace development.
So I
complicated.
Go ahead, Erica.
I'm wondering, I'm just brainstorming a little bit. It feels like the other part is communicating a lot of this, which I know you had on there, the communication plan, but is there even more we could do where we have because I was thinking, I was like, oh, well, I could send the report to the Andrea and she could share it with the chamber, but I don't know how many people are going to get into it. But if there's a easy, simple PowerPoint that we come up with together that we could, like, I could walk through at a chamber meeting when I'm at that meeting, somebody could go to Rotary and present. But I just think anytime I start talking to folks about the dire straits we were in last summer and just kind of emphasizing that, it was really good that you stopped watering. They're really interested on both the impact it made, because we did see our usage go down. And they were, we don't want to create a panic, but I think we could generate some kind of collective community like, oh, okay, we need all hands on deck. And that way, if we do upgrade the code, people will know why, and it won't be like, oh, you're trying to make it more expensive. It's like, oh, no, we need to take care of this together.
Do you think that the PowerPoint, obviously we could link that off the website. Does that communicate it well enough? Or do we need something?
I was thinking that, but with like what we're doing, because I think that's the other part that we should share is how we're taking what we've learned in this report, what we're already doing, and how what we're already doing is kind of actionable in there, and maybe, and then what next steps are going to be, or something inspiring. We don't need to be gloom and doom, but, and I don't know about all the slides in the PowerPoint.
I would agree with that. I think there's some good stuff to start with, but I think it needs some work to be a more condensed, public-facing, like, get right to the point, and the localized stuff. I think that most people that would even look at something like this are pretty familiar with the bigger graphs and charts and kind of where we're headed, but to see the really localized stuff, I think, is where the impact is. And then, here's what we're doing, and maybe what can you do as an individual, or next steps for us, and we need your input, or I don't really know where we're going with this.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the part I'm unclear on. Then what do we want people to be engaged in, or do we pose questions to them? Should we upgrade the code? Should we?
Yeah.
I'm at loss for words. What would be next? But
a good example for me has been the ditching, the piping of the Rockford ditch with the big blue. That's a really powerful visual, and I think people understand reducing evaporative loss or actually eliminating it. So maybe that's something that, this is what the town is doing, this is what the developer is doing, and this is why, because it is such a powerful visual. I was really excited to see that, having heard a number of negative comments about the open ditches that we had last year during the heat of the summer. Maybe that'll resonate. And perhaps that's something that can be perpetuated in further building projects and so forth, that if you are adjacent to a ditch, part of the requirement is that you participate in piping it.
Yeah, and that can be more piping it if it's the right spot to pipe.
Right, exactly.
Everything from grades to silt loads and stuff, it's a pretty
easements
complicated.
And all of that, yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting when we did and Ben was part of this, when we had the community discussions on the comp plan update, there was a resounding thing, don't cover any ditches, keep them open. It was the feeling of the community, and so there's ways to also look at lining certain areas, but it's one of those ones where in certain areas it makes sense, in other areas it doesn't. But the community was really resistant when we had not that what was discussed in 13 and 14 has to dictate now, but that was kind of the last time we had a big public discussion on it, other than project specific.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can understand that the tailouts need to stay open, but, the other stuff, perhaps, like you say, if it's location appropriate, can be considered.
I think this would be, if we don't have to make a decision which way to go right now, I think this is something that would definitely benefit from Heather's input as well. What I'm hearing is we're talking about educating the community, and we're speaking about like different options and where we go from here. Is that?
I think you're right, Marty. I think there are a couple things that I'm hearing would make sense to do right away. And Eric, I think you hit on it. One, somehow we distill the PowerPoint down to what we feel like is the most effective message. We put that on our website. I would think with prominence, so on the front page. And then as part of that, we maybe clean up this table just a little bit. There was a couple of things that were listed as runoff that, but anyway, clean that up as here's what we're doing so far. And then what's the return? How do we receive feedback on that might inform what we do next? We've Ben, you mentioned a community discussion on water. It sounds like we'll be discussing a new green code in the future. You mentioned the build-out rate, things like that. What does that discussion look like? We don't know. Maybe it depends on how many people comment on this and are interested in it. I don't know. But do we? And I would say that if we're going to do this, then that would mean every year, as part of our budget process, that's the memo you've created tonight is just part of the budget process, and it's just another way to look at the budget. Is it organized in this way so that we know? It doesn't have to be included in the budget, but
part of the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that feel for everybody?
Like during one of the department reports or whatever, when we're discussing.
Yeah.
Or they're just flagged as like, this has to do with.
After we get through all the departments, we could easily do kind of when we look at that draft budget in early October, we could say, okay, here's what's included in the draft as it relates to the climate planning and, drought issues, and here's what we've included, and then it'll give you a chance to look and say, okay, do we want to move from A to B or invest more in another topic?
And if we decide to prioritize this, then when we start the budget process and we kind of have, all right, anybody have any priorities, we can bring up the memo that's already been created and say, does this feel good, or do we want to put more money in, which we already kind of do, but this is more informative to where we want to leverage our funding.
Yeah, I think the big shift is that I think Carbondale's done a really good job for a really long time and been a leader in trying to reduce our carbon footprint and hope that everybody else does the same thing and that climate change doesn't happen. And now we're past that, and we're saying it's happening, and we need to keep doing that, and we need to do more of that, but we also have to prepare for the inevitable reality and start adjusting. And I don't think that that's been part of our formal policy and planning process before, so I think it's a good wake-up call.
Which we're well positioned for, because we often get positive comments on the redundancies that we have in place thanks to the planning that staff has done. So it's been a little bit of a model among other municipalities within the Roaring Fork Valley. But let's keep that momentum then going with the help of the community and doing their part as well.
Are we ready at this point to say, yes, we want to have a discussion later on in the year about what else to do, or do we want to just wait and see if we get feedback or what? I say it selfishly because I'm eager to have a community discussion on reduced water use and how we use our ditch. It's not going to be fun, and I think the community is going to push back hard, but I feel like it's time to have that discussion personally. But I don't know where everybody else feels. Or likewise with energy, we're going to be discussing a new energy code. One of the ideas, this is not necessarily a proposal, but some have said, well, we should require solar on every house, no matter what, no matter how big it is. Do we want to have that in the context of this, or do we want to just take that as we normally would, just as an individual code?
I think water is a separate discussion, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. While it's important that we address all of these issues, I think if we try to address everything at once, it may get too overwhelming. And where I also agree with you, we're going to get a lot of pushback when we start speaking about ditches, because that's a sacred cow to a lot of people.
Yep.
But it's a discussion that should be had. I mean, and if our national government is not going to address these issues, then it's up to us at a local level to address them, because it's going to affect us locally.
Well, I think that's also what you just said, Marty. There was a time where I used to think, gosh, we need a national solution. And now not only do I think that that won't happen, I don't want it to happen. And I really feel like all of this is really, we're better off if we come up with it locally.
We are, unfortunately, it's all interrelated. I mean, what we do with water is going to affect other communities downstream, and what other communities upstream do will affect us. But we can control our piece of the pie. And, you know, I think Carbondale, in a lot of areas, whether it's vaping, whether it's environment, I mean, I think we really lead by example. And I think we can do this with water. And I think having a discussion that may be uncomfortable, you know, that's part of the process. I wasn't comfortable about all the discussions we had about the E-Bill of Rights. But it was a discussion that needed to be had. And something came out of it, and it's a model for us. And I really think it's a model for some other communities. Not to sound too self-righteous, but I think we should pursue that path. This affects our daily lives, our water, whether it's drinking, gardening, whatever.
I know I think Heather mentioned the E-Board wants to be part of the discussion with water as well. And so I don't know if we want to, I don't know what their role would be or what we ask them to participate in this part. I don't know.
The E-Board has some ambitious goals as it relates to energy codes. But I mean, it's across the board, their interest. But you also have Parks and Rec Commission. I mean, I think we need a discussion on what some of our parks are going to look like long-term as we deal with some of these issues, and what are the community values on that? Do we keep the soccer green fields and baseball fields nice and lush, but let the other areas go? I mean, to more to native vegetation. You know, that's a discussion, and then you also have the tree board dealing as we're looking at tree species and what we want in terms of our ideal planning and what those water demands are. So we've got some other, you know, of our advisory boards, this topic crosses at least 3, and I've probably missed. Obviously, Planning Commission on the development side is a big one too.
So maybe one of the things we do is they at least look at this table. At least it gives like the different categories and come up with what they would do or like to do or have on their, like I think of the tree board. If they don't already have a plan, or do they want to put up a plan for what should be planted in Carbondale as we replace, you know, trees that are down, or what we recommend in the code for people to plant a new construction or something.
Yeah, or I mean, we have that in place now, and it's based on our current climate zones, but maybe it's how does that modify over time? We've already seen, in terms of some of the energies, the climate zones have actually changed over time, and I think we've adapted that with our current requirements, but we need to keep that, you know, looking down the line.
I think we could ask, because we now have this memo, we could just ask boards and commissions to review it and consider it in their next year's planning and budget requests, just for it to spark interest. And, you know, they may say, yeah, that's great, we're already doing plenty, we don't want to do more, or, gosh, we need to do more.
Right.
Just to within their work plans for the next year.
Yeah.
Since most of them don't have budgets.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's right.
This year, just to clarify. I don't want to think that.
That was the greatest way to get Jay's attention.
Some of them think they have budgets.
That's my point.
I was going to say something else, but I'm forgetting right now. Oh, I know. I guess should like Parks and Rec have this, at least this PowerPoint on their agenda? I don't know who would walk them through it. Maybe Luis would, or maybe, I don't know, so then they could either have the dialed down version or our commissions get this full version, so they see this in their packets. And
I think we tried to share with them the full study.
Yeah.
But what I really like is the climate portion of it is just so in your face that you can digest that pretty quickly. So I think that was all shared with them, but I don't know if it's been as an agenda item. I'll follow up on that.
Yeah.
And didn't we talk about exploring whether or not it's a possibility to have the folks that conducted the study come back and give like a community presentation, or was that?
Yeah, let me follow up and check on that. I think we're kind of done with their time, but they also want to promo this program for other communities, so let us check.
I think that would be great if there's any way we can do that, because that would be the kind of event that I think would get a lot of community members out. And if it was structured, because I'm really sitting here kind of racking my brain for how do we actually move forward on this. We've got a lot of ideas, but I don't feel like I see a clear path ahead. But if we hosted them, some experts that can kind of lay this out in condensed form, and then facilitate some sort of discussion about, so what do we want to do with this information? I think that could bring in a lot of that discussion about water and energy and all the various things.
So what if we did this? We condensed the PowerPoint. I don't know who does that, whether Heather.
That's what I don't know. Who's the we?
I know, I was going to ask that too.
Well, we agree that we want the PowerPoint condensed. Yeah. Jay and Angie can revise the memo or, just dial it in. Yep. We would post both of those things on the homepage on our website. Jay would ask boards and commissions to review the memo and consider it for future work plans, and therefore our work sessions with them. And then you'll see if a community presentation is viable. I have little doubt that between all our nonprofits, we could even help. We as a community could sponsor them coming back. I don't think it would have to be on their dime. And then we go from there.
Well, I can certainly reach out to some of my contacts here on the water forum as well, the Colorado River District. I mean, it's right there in Glenwood. I think they would be very open to supporting us in this effort. And I would take pleasure in doing that. And then I can forward, when it becomes available, this drought contingency plan that I listened to on Friday, which is a shorter version of this, but it's, a lot of the same information. So maybe that will add some clarity to which way we'd like to use what we have in terms of presentation material.
I also think it's at least worth asking if they're interested in helping us succeed by using this and they're willing to maybe come and present. Maybe we say, hey, we're also planning to condense the PowerPoint. Do you want to do that for us? Because you know the information better than we do. Mm. It's worth asking. If not, I think maybe even between the board.
Yeah, we could do
well, I think we could have Angie make a first cut of that because she's been part of that whole process and try to tie it into some of her school projects too. So we'll.
But knowing scientists, they may not want us to condense it. They may say, oh, no, we'll help you with that.
She's been working pretty carefully with the PhD candidates on this, and it is an interesting dialogue.
Yeah.
In terms of what to use and what not. So we'll coordinate with them.
Okay. How does that feel for everybody?
Good. Yeah. I think it sounds good.
Okay. And then based on what you say and what will depend on when the meeting is and what it looks like, so we'll discuss that in the future.
And maybe it's just once a month we have, whether it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes, an agenda time. And we just set it regularly to say, here's what's going on with this process and here's where we're doing with our planning efforts on it, just so it stays in a regular forefront. Because I honestly think this is one of the most important things that you as a board can work on for the next couple of years, because it should be shaping what we're doing.
I do think, though, that the community meeting is a great way for us to sort of get the information out there and then say, okay, here are the things, here are the big things that we should be, that the board has thought about discussing. And just get that feedback. So,
is it something that could be tied into Dandelion Day, or is that too short a timeline?
What month is Dandelion Day?
April.
Oh, yeah, because it's
Oh.
Earth Day.
It's like May 10th or 11th, somewhere, usually right around there.
Possibly.
Whatever that Saturday is.
We just gave a fat budget for a big old event.
I got $1,500 to plan it.
They better not get used to it, though.
That's a good idea. Okay. Any other comments?
And there's a chamber meeting on Thursday, and so as part of my report out, I was thinking I could mention this and talk to them about how they would want to get this information and how they would want to be part of helping distribute it or be part of a community meeting.
Okay.
What time's the meeting? 9 o'clock?
The chamber, 8.
8.
All right. Last call. Take a break before the executive session.
Great.
Okay.